everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to mix different acid dye colors together to make our own custom blends with the specific intent to speckle with these custom colors. Before I talk a little bit more about this project, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Lisa S. Lisa, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. Now, I have mixed colors a lot here on the channel, and including once I mixed all 40 Jacquard acid dyes together to create my own custom powder. And when you speckle with this powder, you get a rainbow of speckles. However, the average color is sort of a brownish purple colored speckle, a very deep neutral. You aren't getting a complete rainbow of all 40 of the colors separately. You're getting some separation and breaking of these colors because when I milled them, I also didn't use like a mortar and pestle to really try to blend it like super well. There might be some pigments that have bigger chunks and smaller chunks, resulting in multicolored speckles. But in a live stream over the summer, I did have not actual primaries, but I had a non-primary blue, yellow, and red. I mixed them together and was able to create orange, or more orange, green for sure, and purplish speckles based on those blends. Now the purple especially did break, but that is the case of pre-mixed and milled purple dyes as well. So we're gonna play around with a few different proportions of a primary blue and pink to try to make our own custom purple speckle color. So who knows exactly how well this will or will not work. I have played around with this in the past and shown that it's different if you layer on colors separately versus mix them together. But I have more knowledge now about, at least with liquid dyes, the proportions of the different colors you need to make something look more purple versus still feeling very pink. And so I think we're gonna give this a shot and see where we end up. Before we go to the full skeins that will be Lisa's colorway, this is Knit Pick Stroll Fingering Weight yarn, 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. We're gonna play around with speckling on some Miniskeins. These are 20 gram Miniskeins of Wool to Die Force Platinum Sock. It's the exact same fiber content as Stroll. They're just already made into minis for me. And my plan is to speckle on one with our pink, on one with our blue, and then we'll have 3 that are blends in the middle based on some of those triad color mixing exercises I've done in the past. That's my plan. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna go pre-soak all of this yarn overnight in just some plain tap water. In this tub that I used on another video, I had 2 healthy glugs of white vinegar and then just some plain tap water. And I'm removing our yarn from our pre-soak and adding it in here so that way there is going to be some acid in our yarn already. We are going to be mixing our dyes with citric acid, which does bring acid to the equation, will help those dyes strike, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit more. Now, I could have pre-soaked the yarn overnight with vinegar, but I often like to add vinegar later on because sometimes I pre-soak yarn for more than one project at once, and I like the flexibility of having the yarn pre-soaked without acid, because then if I change my mind when I'm doing with that yarn, I can. But anyway, this will be ready to go as soon as I'm ready to dye it. I also have this skein of yarn that I dyed a long time ago that has a few itty bitty red speckles in it. But here you go, you can see a little bit there. And I decided that this yarn needed to be over dyed at some point. So I'll be using this as my yarn mop today, and I'm gonna pop this skein of Stroll just into the water with vinegar that we have here. And it doesn't need to soak for very long, but I wonder if I'll be able to find the video that it was from to link that below. Probably some leave no dye behind. But anyway, this is why our yarn mop today is already kind of grayish. And this is also just a skein of Stroll, the same 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon content. I have 5 cups here, each with 1 teaspoon of citric acid powder. And this is the food grade citric acid, and it is the more finely milled compared to the citric acid I bought from Dharma. And so I think this is the citric acid I prefer for speckling overall. But I'm gonna now go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we're gonna start adding dye here. Deep magenta and Caribbean blue are primary colors. And my plan isn't to have the exact same amount of dye in each cup, but I'm gonna try to set things up as follows. And so I have these tiny spoons, which I think are 1/32 of a teaspoon. And I'm gonna add 1 of the pink in each of the 3 cups. Attempting to level it off, but it's not that big of a deal. And then I'm going to take just a tiny bit of the pink, so less than a scoopful. And I'm going to add that to the final container. And I'm going to do the same thing with the blue, where I'm going to attempt to have a full scoop of the blue in these first 3 containers. Now, measuring dyes out by volume is not as precise as measuring it out by weight. And especially when I'm trying to do the tiny bit that I'm doing for this last one here, I don't know if I have an equivalent amount of blue to a lot more pink in here that I did on the other side. That I don't know. And I'm gonna have to be okay with that. What we have now is 1 cup that is all magenta. And I'll stir these up more than just what I'm showing here. We have 1 cup that is all Caribbean blue. We have a cup in the middle that has twice as much dye to the volume of citric acid, but we're gonna look more at the actual color of what we see compared to what we have elsewhere. And again, I'm gonna stir these more. Now right here, we have a lot more blue and a little bit of pink. The triad color mixing exercise with the deep magenta and the Caribbean blue does show that the middle is sort of a deep blue color, but that's by weight, not by volume. This is looking very, very pink with the 1-to-1, so we might need to add more blue just so that way things feel like there is a little bit of a change. But the other thing I should point out here is that the blue sort of mixed with the citric acid doesn't have as much visible pigment that we see looking at that. Like this looks very white, and that the pinks look a lot more pigmented. So we will see. But let me grab, oh bummer. I wanted to do this on a paper towel, but my paper towels are all multicolored. All right, we're gonna try this again with a damp tissue, which looks like there's a tiny bit of blue on it. But I'm gonna take a little bit of the powder of our blue, our lot of blue with a little bit of pink, and it's definitely broken. But if you look at the color between the two, it is less turquoise. The middle gives us a more purpley color. Next we have a very, very berry color. It feels very, very pink. And then finally, we have our deep magenta. Let me zoom you in here on these colors. This is actually a really lovely gradient, because if you were to look at these 2 colors right here, you might not think that they are that different from the originals. It's only looking at this blue, which looks very frozen, next to Caribbean blue, that you start to feel, huh, it is more red. It's got more red in it.
And the same thing here, the difference of these two pinks, this is way more berry. Now, I expect that these colors will break some with speckling, especially when we go onto our Miniskeins and start speckling onto those. But I think that we have like a really lovely catalog of colors here that we wouldn't have had otherwise if we had just stuck with the deep magenta and the Caribbean blue and used just those together.
Now, I know that this mixture is more likely to break than if I was trying this with a blue and a yellow. I think that a green would be a little bit easier for this type of experiment. However, I'm picking purple because I really want to do this project, and green was on the list of colors that Lisa wanted to avoid. So if you want to learn more about how you can become a lab partner for an episode of Dyepot Weekly, you get to pick the yarn base I use and tell me what colors you don't want me to use, and then I create a project with you in mind. You can find more details over in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. But now, let's actually finally try these speckles and have me stop talking. To give something that is a little bit prettier than our tissue, I brought out the 5 Miniskeins of platinum sock and laid them out on the counter, focusing on each individual Miniskein with speckling just one of the 5 colors that I had set up, knowing that our middle color does have a lot more pigment in it than the quote pure primaries on either side. Now, we might see breaking in speckles, both because these are blends of colors and blends of colors often break, but also because I'm doing this next to one another, and so it's possible that some of the pink could make it onto one of the other Miniskeins, even though I am attempting to keep them relatively separate. Again, color breaking is when you have a blend of different pigments in a premixed color or a color you mix yourself, and you see the colors separate into the different colored pigments that were there. And so in this case, when we're using a more purpley color, we see probably elements of the bright blue and bright pink. But we see those a little bit less frequently than we see the overall combined color. And so this is something that you need to consider anytime you are going to be speckling with a premixed blend. For example, Toner Black from Dharma has some red and maybe yellow speckles in it, pigments in it, and so when you speckle, you sometimes see those. Whereas True Black is only a black pigment, so speckling with that will only give you black speckles. There are some other reasons why colors might break. It might be the individual particles you are dusting on are physically separate from one another, or it can also sometimes be because different colors will bind to yarn at different rates. And so that is another element that you can see, where maybe sometimes you have a speckle that is one color in the center, but you have another color halo around it. That is also a type of breaking. Anyway, I hope that I'm explaining this clearly. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll try to talk about this more in this video.
All right, we've got our colors. I love this as a gradient. I'm excited to play with these colors all on one colorway too. I think that that's going to be really, really fun. But right now I need to go heat set this. I am going to carefully pick up each one and put it in a steamer basket, attempting to have them touch each other as little as possible. But they will likely be touching each other some. And I'm not washing my hands in between either. And I'm going to steam set that for 30 minutes. But even this mess on the counter is really pretty. And here is our yarn mop. We are going to clean up the counter a bit right now. And it'll get more color on it because we are about to go and actually dye some yarn for Lisa. Based on these colors that we made. These DIY Speckle custom colors, and I'm very excited. I am going to wipe down the counter with a paper towel first, though.
It's been 30 minutes and we have our lovely little gradient here. I'm curious, there might be some blue, yeah, a tiny bit of blue on our primary pink just because they were next to each other. But I'm now going to set these aside so they can cool and we can wash it. And then we can start dyeing Lisa's yarn. And for that, I think I want to go low immersion. Okay, here we are in my catering steam pan. I have 200 grams of the stroll, and I'm going to cover this with enough of that pre-soak water with vinegar. And I want things to be low-ish. So let's see. I would say that maybe I've added 5-6 cups of water here so far, and so most of the yarn is at the surface versus beneath the water. And I'm just going to add a little bit more. It's okay if our colors spread some. And the reason why I don't mind spreading is some amount of the dyes will sort of strike where we place it. But then we should get potentially a purplish backdrop, but maybe some soft blues and pinks sort of in the backdrop as well. This is overall a palette I've played with many, many times, but not with all the premixed colors that I have here. So I'm excited to see where we go. I'm now turning on the 2 gas burners that are below the yarn, and we are going to heat this up.
Mask on, and that is too hot. You don't need the yarn. You don't need the yarn to simmer. For the first run of colors, I'm going to do a little bit of each color, and then we're going to end up mixing things up all over. But I'm doing this because I'm curious about the amount of breaking or spread we might see from these colors. Ultimately, I think the thing that's going to be really fun about using all of these combined colors instead of using just the pink and just the blue is that it's going to give a little bit more blend and cohesion to all of these colors overall. There will be a little bit less contrast between the pink and the blue. And this is something that I like doing. I like picking a lot of colors that are close to one another but aren't the same for when I'm doing speckling with a lot of colors. That's something I just enjoy. Now let's see. Here is our deep magenta. And just for contrast's sake, I'm putting a little bit of it down here by the blue, and a little bit of blue down here by the pink. Just so that way we can visualize that contrast a little better. Now when I zoom in on our middle color here, I do see breaking, although it is very, very subtle. Around some of these speckles you can see a little bit of a blue halo. I think that the pinks are striking a little bit faster. This is a very broken violet-esque kind of mix. There are a few individual pink speckles. Most of it is a blend, but this is a mixture. Oh gosh, there's down here there's a big pink spot that is like, the color has just wicked down. That's really funny. But my point is that sort of a 1-to-1 ratio of these colors is an amount that I should play with around a lot more to see if I can get something like using a paintbrush to get broken violet speckles on yarn. Maybe we can do something like that with this particular blend. Now around here there are in places some areas that feel more blue that is also breaking, but we did just have a little bit of blue. Overall the whole temperature of the color has shifted to be more blue from that primary deep magenta, but we're not seeing like as many speckles that are that pink, maybe a handful. Mostly things are blended. And I would say the same thing is a little bit true over here, but we are getting a slight bit more of that Caribbean blue in the spread. This is the sample that had a lot of blue with a tiny bit of pink. But anyway, now we're here to play. And we're here to speckle, not in lines or tiny patches, but a little bit all over. Haven't quite decided how I want this all to go, But this is just me taking one of the colors and going, not wild, it's not fair to say wild, but going a lot all over. And we're going to layer these colors. And because we're layering, things will blend more. But if I was only layering the pink and the blue, there would be some areas where they would overlap, but there would be, again, more contrast between them. And I don't know if I have a good example of that right now. Okay, so I did not clear off my fingers before going into the Caribbean blue just now. So that means I may have introduced some pink in there. So things are no longer, quote, pure. But I don't think that that is an issue as we go around and play with and layer these colors. And the nice thing about having sort of a more continuous heat source here is that to some extent, some of these colors as they dissolve and strike on the yarn are actually, they're being heat set in place. So we're able to have speckles layered on speckles without things becoming a total smudge. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like this is a colorway you could create with more than two colors. But I am super excited with how well this is working, because this means that you can do speckles and get fun, different colored speckles and make your own blends. Maybe not exactly like the way you would mix liquid dyes, but it's a little bit similar, and that is awesome. What's funny is that I've definitely played with something very similar to this before. There was one Hanukkah where I tried speckling with two colors mixed together versus separately, and I think that the ratios I used of the colors didn't give as big of an impact and conclusion to me to think, oh, of course I can mix my own speckle colors. But here you go. We have a lot of different speckle colors in here. We really have 5 different overall colors, but it's mixed from just 2. And so that's exciting and something that warrants more exploration. But anyway, I'm going to heat things for 5 minutes before I flip the yarn over and add color to the other side.
Waiting 5 minutes might not be absolutely necessary. Potentially a minute or 2 would be fine. But I have found in the past that if I were to flip the yarn right away, we would get more spread of the colors, and the contrast between the speckles and the background color would be reduced. And this is because there's some dye that maybe hasn't dissolved fully yet or even had time to actually bind to the yarn. And so then when you flip it and then introduce that to more water and movement, then the color dissolves in the water and spreads. And so that can be a little different. So having it sit for a little bit just gives us a little more time. And so for this project, I did wait about 5 minutes in between each flip until I was satisfied with the total amount of color we had on our yarn. And then I made sure that I waited a total of 30 minutes from the last time I added dye. And as it was going, if it seemed like the water level was getting a little low, I just added a little bit more of that water with vinegar that I had used in the pre-soak. Our yarn mop has had a smattering of color today. I'm going to go ahead and steam set this for 30 minutes off camera, and then probably wash it off camera as well, but we'll bring her back in the end. I think she was probably off camera most of the time today. The immersion yarn is cooling in the pan, and I figured we'd wash our minis. I'm not expecting any bleeding there or here. The Caribbean blue is a color that can bleed, but we didn't use enough of it where I would expect that to be any kind of issue. Now, there is always a chance with speckling that, especially when you do countertop speckles like these, that there is some undissolved dye, and so sometimes that can dissolve right away and be a little bit of bleeding that resolves quickly. But we're not seeing any of that today. So I'm going to rinse out that soap. I just used some clear dish soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll wash our little immersion yarn. I was not filming. I just added our immersion yarn to some water, and I'm now adding some dish soap. And I was saying that I'm not seeing any bleeding, and I don't expect to, which is always a wonderful feeling to have. Because sometimes I have a feeling that colors could bleed, but this time there's absolutely nothing there. So I'm going to finish rinsing out the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and hang it up to dry. Here's the finished dry yarn we dyed with our custom speckled colors. Our custom colors that we got by mixing the dry dye powder to create more than just a blue and a pink on speckle form. So let's look at the Miniskeins first. Looking at the speckled colors individually on Miniskeins, it's a little bit hard to tell the difference between the two blues. I find it easier to tell the difference between the two pinks though. The differences here are so subtle. It's the difference between a turquoise and a more primary blue. You can see some of the breaking in here with the blue, but you know, we have our primary fuchsia and then a more berry color. This medium blurple kind of color does stand out a little bit more from the ones on either side, but yeah, I mean, this works so well. There is a lot of breaking in this middle color, and in here you can see areas where you can see breaking within the speckles themselves a little bit. Tempting to zoom in a little further so you can see. When the yarn's twisted up, you can see all the different colors a little better. I don't know. I don't know why I'm so excited and why this isn't something that I've tried more of. Even from those like really early experiments that I did back in the day. Of course you should be able to do this. And what this also means is that don't get me wrong, there are some pure pigment dyes that are non-primary colors. And so you can get some colors that don't break or don't break as much from other like pre-mixed secondary, tertiary colors and things like that. But what this does mean is that you can do speckles without having to buy as many acid dye colors. You can have your own shift. And if the speckle of one color is a little bit too much in one direction and you wish it was a little bit deeper, you can kind of mess around and take care of that. I mean, that's amazing. On the finished low immersion yarn, the blues definitely spread more than the pinks. Yes, there are areas that still feel white, but we have a lot of pastel blue throughout. It's hard to say because of the way things are layered how many different colored speckles we feel in here. But I do feel like there's more than just a medium purple, pink, and primary blue, that we have some more shifts in between. And I just love the way that these speckles layer on top of each other. Lisa S., thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. If any of you would like to learn how you can get shout outs in one of my videos, go and check out the lab partner listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I'll have links down in the video description. As a lab partner, you will get to pick the yarn base that I dye, tell me some colors to avoid, and then I will film a dyeing project with you in mind. The whole thing is a lot of fun and a really great way to help support the content here. Of course, there's other ways to help support the content. I have other ready to ship yarn in my shop, but you can always subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. That is free and the best way to help support things here. I'm really happy with the ways I transformed the yarn mop. There were those few pinkish speckles on here before, and now there's just a lot more color. And so this was something that didn't feel quite finished, and now it does. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you found this video helpful. I want to play around with this more. I have plans to do this with green. I think that greens are a little bit easier than purples because I think that even though pre-mixed greens can have a lot of breaking, I think from when I did this the very first time in that mystery surprise live stream, maybe there's less breaking with the greens. So we'll give that a shot. But anyway, subscribe, turn on notifications, and all that jazz. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.